Welcome to episode 45 of the Ikigai podcast. This is the guest host, Dr. Caitlin Kite from the University of Exeter. And on this episode, I am going to be interviewing the founder of Ikigai Tribe and author of the new book, IKIGAI-KAN, Feel a Life Worth Living, Nick Kemp. Nick, welcome to your own podcast.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, for taking on the role of guest host. And I'm really excited to be on my own podcast as a guest.
Excellent. I'm just going to dive right in and ask you a few questions about, the main topic of the hour, which is your new book. But we'll also explore some exciting new things around the book, how the book came into being, maybe what your next steps are. So can you just tell us a little bit about the main message of the book?
Well, before we do that, I think we should explain why you are the host. And the reason why you are the host is you are the editor of my book. And you seemed like hundreds of hours going through all my drafts and making lots of thoughtful suggestions and corrections and helping me think through things. And you actually saved the book, I think, for me, because I was almost going to give up on the book. So I will never be able to thank you enough. So thank you so much for everything you've done for me.
You're very welcome. And it didn't feel like hundreds of hours. It passed the blink of an eye. And genuinely, to everyone out there, not just to Nick, it's a really great read. It was a fast thing to do because it was fascinating and I learned a lot and it was just really uplifting. And I hope that comes through in our conversation today.
So do I. Okay. All right. So the main message of the book.
Tell us a little bit more.
Well, that is a good question. And I guess in a nutshell, the main message was to explain to the reader that Ikigai is something you feel, not chase or earn. So I wanted to offer, I guess, a Japanese perspective of what Ikigai means. But if I talk about the book itself, across the 10 chapters, I offer different perspectives of Ikigai, and I provide a context for those perspectives by exploring different aspects of Japanese culture. And then I link these perspectives to ideas and philosophies and practices to show that it is a cultural concept. And hopefully that can resonate with the reader and be helpful to them. And that while it's a unique cultural concept to Japan, it's also a universal concept. And I wouldn't really call the book a self-help book, even though I'm actually putting it in the self-help section of Amazon. For me, it was a deep dive into the psychology of Ikigai. And I guess part of what I hope to achieve the book is to help the reader find a way to find or to feel actually a more fulfilling and meaningful life. And there are frameworks and advice in the book to help the reader.
Wonderful. I guess I should also mention to people who are listening that I'm a member of your Ikigai Tribe community. I've taken your workshops on Ikigai and I've taught using what I've learned. And every time I teach, I have students who say, where can I find out more about this? So I think it's really nice that there is now a resource that they can turn to in their own time to find out more about all of what you just described. There's definitely an appetite for that.
Indeed. And I still got an appetite. So there's so much to learn about. If you think about it, what does make life feel worth living? Trying to answer that, I think you need many long, meaningful conversations with many people from many different cultures, not just Japan. So but my book is focused on Japan, so hopefully it does offer some insight to the reader.
Well, interestingly, there are a couple of Ikigai books out there. And so it's interesting to think about how does your book fit within that spectrum of offerings. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the book and add your take to those others?
I guess for me, who I did live in Japan for 10 years. My wife's Japanese, and I've been studying the language for 25 years. Most of the books some of the books I've come across offer a very romanticized perception of Ikigai. And there is a lot of misinformation on Ikigai on the web and in quite a few books. So I guess for me, I wanted to offer a Japanese perspective and really go deep with that. So that was the initial purpose. I was thinking, wow, all this information on the web and Venn diagrams, and it's the secret hack to longevity, and it's a word from Okinawa, and it's your one life purpose. I was thinking, oh, that's actually completely wrong. So maybe I should write a book. But as you know, it took me a while to get started.
Well, and we've talked a little bit about your goal in writing the book and what you're trying to achieve with the book, and you've touched on that a little bit, but I think that there are some other ideas you might want to add to what you've just said. So do you want to think a little bit more about, now that you've put the book out in the world, what do you hope it's going to achieve?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the reasons I wrote the book were obviously to dispel these myths and Western romanticized notions about Ikigai, and then present an accurate and respectful perspective in the context of Japanese culture. And for me, I felt it was a way to give back to Japan and also recognize all the people I've interviewed on my podcast. And a lot of researchers, they're really good at researching, but they're terrible at marketing. So they'll spend hundreds of hours on a paper or on a dissertation, and then they don't know how to find an audience for it. So I wanted to give back to them. And I do hope will be a little bit of a legacy I can pass on to my son. But it doesn't feel like that at the moment with his constant jibes and sort of playfulness about me being an author. So,
sometimes you have to grow up a little bit. You need some perspective. He'll look back one day.
Hopefully in 10 years or something. But to answer your question, what am I hoping to achieve with the book? I guess in a nutshell, I'd like to open up the reader to a different way of thinking and living, and that there is another way to approach life that would hopefully make your life feel even more worth living and more fulfilling.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, if you don't mind, and just pick up something that you said about, respectfully thinking about Japanese culture, because this is something that you and I have discussed quite a lot in thinking about the book. How do you make sure that there is an appreciation, not an appropriation? And so I wonder if maybe you could expand a little bit on, how you went about presenting this information, kind of as partly an outsider, but also kind of partly, someone who's connected through your family with Japan as well.
I mean, I guess this all really goes back to the day I decided something needs to be done about this misrepresentation or cultural appropriation of Ikigai. And this goes back almost 4 years or 3.5 years ago when I first thought, well, maybe I could do something. And at that time, I knew very little about Ikigai. All I knew was it's not all these things that we're finding on the web. I knew it was deeper and broader, but I really didn't know anything more than that. So I thought that the best thing to do would be to start a podcast and interview professors. And I was really hopeful that if I got one interview with a professor or an author, specifically a Japanese professor and author, that probably could kickstart the podcast. And so I was very lucky, and that happened with Professor Akihiro Hasegawa, who isn't a fluent speaker of English. And he was really courageous coming onto my podcast and agreeing to, answer all these questions about Ikigai. So I think that's what I wanted to do for the book as well, is to offer these perspectives from researchers to authors to Japanese artists to even everyday Japanese. And perhaps also include my own perspective and experiences of living in Japan to give a broader, more in-depth and more culturally, I guess, evidence-based perspective on this concept that is hard to define and explain. And I see the book almost as a long conversation with different people on the subject.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting description, because I do think it has that kind of comfortable and relaxed feel where you kind of feel like you've gone to a cocktail party with some really knowledgeable folks and you're just wandering around the room, picking up on one conversation after another and learning little nuggets from each conversation.
Oh, that sounds good. A drink always helps. So if
Yeah.
imagine maybe have a drink while you're reading the book, and that might add to the experience.
Well, let me ask then kind of a follow-up question. So you've just spoken a little bit about the folks whose ideas you've incorporated here. What about the people that you anticipate reading the book? What sorts of readers did you picture in your mind's eye? Who was your audience that you were trying to reach?
Yeah, this is an interesting question, because I remember being strongly advised that you should have one reader in mind. It must be very specific. You must know if their age and if they're married and single, and that was interesting for me, because I thought, okay, I've really got to think about who my reader is. But at the same time, I thought there was a broader audience. So in the end, I decided to have both an ideal reader and a broader audience. And believe it or not, my ideal reader was actually someone just like you. So I went through this process and thought, well, my ideal reader, she's female, she's academic, she's well-read, culturally aware, someone who knew there was more to Ikigai than just the Venn diagram, knew there was, more to it than these romanticized views, and someone who values the truth and wants to see the whole picture of cultural aspects. But also I knew, because Ikigai is such a fascinating and I guess almost loved concept, I thought there would be a large audience, and that would include pretty much anyone who has a love for Japan, who loves the Japanese people and has a strong interest in Japanese culture.
Well, obviously, I've already said I did enjoy the book, so you did a good job with your targeting.
Okay.
But hopefully, I think you're right. I think it is something that's very accessible to and interesting to other folks as well. So I'm sure there will be a wide range of listeners who will also want to follow up, even if they don't have all those criteria.
No. I mean, and I kind of feel not bad. I mean, I don't want to sound like, oh, it's only for academics who are smart, but that was what I was encouraged to do. You've got to be very clear on who you're serving with the book. Mm-hmm. But I do think, I mean, this is the one thing you're not meant to say as an author. Oh, my book's for everyone, because that kind of would suggest you haven't really thought about who you're writing for. But I do think it's for everyone who loves Japan and wants to know more about the culture. Yeah.
Well, kind of picking up on that, if there is this wide readership, is there a particular person or type of person that you think would really benefit from reading this book, that would get a lot out of it?
I actually do. And I think it's someone who wants to develop an intimate relationship with Japan, but can't maybe actually go to the country or doesn't have enough time to learn the language. But they'd love to learn, more about the culture and maybe more about the heart and soul of these cultural aspects, because the book does cover many cultural aspects, not just Ikigai. Mm. So, I hope it's someone who is so busy with their life doing all these things they enjoy, and they're busy with their work and life. But in the back of their mind, they're always thinking, oh, God, I wish I could go to Japan. Or, God, I wish I could study Japanese. And no, they just don't have the time. So hopefully the book will satisfy them to some degree. Yeah.
A miniature holiday.
Yeah. Nice holiday. Yeah. Interesting holiday. Yeah.
So what about then, thinking of audience, if you could send a copy of your book, and I know you've got your first print run that's gone through, you've got a box sitting there with you. If you could send one of those to anyone, and they would be able to read it, who would that be? Who do you really want to be able to read your book?
Yeah, I thought about this. I mean, it would be cool if my parents could read the book, but they're both no longer with us, so that's a bit unfortunate. Because I think by writing this book, you really do reveal, your innermost thoughts, who you are, and it would be very interesting for my parents to maybe read this and they'll discover a side of me they didn't really know existed. I would actually love for my Japanese friends also to read the book. So if the book were to be translated, I would love to see their reactions. And I would hope that I've been accurate and respectful to the themes and to their culture. I guess the one person I would hope would read my book, of course, is my son. But maybe I better give him a copy in, I don't know, a few more years. But yeah, he'll read the book. So that'll be interesting. And I guess I want to send the book to all the people who've contributed, because so many people have contributed, and it would be my way of sort of saying thank you.
Mm.
So yeah, I hope a lot of people read the book, but I guess if it's one person, hopefully my son.
Well, I'm sure he'll get there, even if he doesn't appreciate it now, as we've mentioned, he'll come around.
Yeah, he will.
So just one last thing, really, to kind of think about. Well, a couple last things, I guess, to think about the basics of the book, the introduction to the book. How did you come up with the title? Because I know you thought about it long and hard. So where did that title come from, and what do you hope that, like, when people see that, what are they going to think of when they look at your book?
Yeah, this was an interesting opportunity because I thought, there are so many books using the title Ikigai and, The Secret To, or The Japanese Way Of, and I was lucky in that I did a lot of research. And I found, I guess, someone I would love to meet. And I see her as the mother of Ikigai. And she is this pioneering researcher who wrote the seminal book on the concept called Ikigai ni Tsuite, which would translate to mean about Ikigai or on Ikigai. And she actually defined the concept using both the word Ikigai, or the words Ikigai and IKIGAI-KAN. So Ikigai-KAN are the emotions and feelings you experience when you feel that life is worth living. It's similar to Viktor Frankl's sense of meaning from his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And so as the most genuine thing about Ikigai are our emotions, I wanted to use that title to highlight the theme of the book, but also to pay homage to Miyako Kamiya, this lady this amazing woman who I think should be recognized as the mother of Ikigai.
And so that then relates to the kanji character that you've got on the book cover. So what's the meaning of this character, and what made you decide to feature it so prominently? Because it is right in the center. Your eye is immediately drawn to it.
Show my book again. Yeah, so this is a real joy for me to show, because actually this is my design as well. And I never really was good at design, but the kanji character is Kan. And so it has many meanings, but I find it a very well-balanced, dynamic, beautiful, eye-catching kanji. And yeah, it has multiple meanings. And that can include feeling, sensation, emotion, admiration, impression, perception, and awareness. And because I talk about Kan so much in the book, not just Ikigai-kan, but all these different types of other Kan, it just made sense to have the kanji on my book. And I wanted, again, to do it in a way that, I guess, which I put a lot of thought into the cover. So that the cover, the actual background is a photo of washi paper. On the spine, I have my inkan, my kakuin inkan, which is a seal that was specially designed for my community. And then on the back, I have a framework that, the readers can dive into the book. But that's another hat tip, I guess, to Miyako Kamiya. So yeah, the whole process of designing the cover and coming up with the title, the kanji, and then even the tagline, "Feel a life worth living." And as you know, I had quite a few discussions with my Ikigai tribe members on, what should I use for the title or the subtitle? But in the end, I had to, come to a decision and be comfortable with that. So I'm really comfortable with Ikigai-kan, Feel a Life Worth Living.
Wonderful. So
Yeah.
you walked us through just now the process of choosing the title, choosing the kanji. What about writing the book? Because I think that was probably slightly more complex than choosing the cover.
Yeah, this is something I never thought I would do. I really struggled with English as a student, and I think the last thing I ever wanted to do was to write in the classroom or type on a computer. So as you know, it was extremely challenging for me. And yeah, as I just mentioned, I had this incredibly low self-esteem when it came to writing, like all aspects of it, spelling, grammar, a lack of vocabulary. But I think because the theme was so important and something I really cared about, I felt this sense of obligation to write the book. So it became this challenge to face and overcome. And yeah, that was one of the reasons. I'm not really answering the question at the moment, but I'm sort of leading there. And to be completely transparent, it was probably also the best next thing at the time to do for my business, because I was gaining traction with the podcast and I was starting the coaching certificate program. And as someone who's, trying to grow a business, you think, what would be the next best thing? And do you remember we actually had a chat where I joked, oh, one day I'll write a book. And then you said, well, I'm a technical editor, so I'll do the editing for you. We kind of both laughed about it. And 2 years later, here we are. So that's amazing. Yeah, but it was actually became a source of Ikigai. So it was very rewarding at times and also challenging. The editing process with you was quite intimate for me. I know that sounds it might sound strange, but you were the first person I was sharing all these ideas and thoughts and memories with. And it got quite emotional. I remember tears dropping onto my hands when I was sort of typing stories. I might well up now, but but I think when you write, you discover yourself, because you are placing yourself in a position of contemplation and truth. So you have to accept your limitations and be honest with yourself when you write. You've got to be open to, obviously, your editor's ideas and thoughts and suggestions and corrections. And yeah, that was really interesting, because you could easily take some correction or some edit personally and go, oh, but that's really important. But for me, it never felt like that. So I felt you were so careful and caring with your editing.
Well,
But
thank you. Well, it's worth saying, really, that from my point of view as well, it was also challenging to edit, not because it had lots of things that needed to be fixed, but because you're absolutely right. You were being really personal and honest. And I would get to sections and I would think, okay, maybe there's a grammatical thing that I should talk about. But if I change that grammatical thing, will it change the feel? Will it change the passion that's come through? And if I suggest something about this really personal, story about your family, your father or something, is that going to sound like I'm being uncaring? So it was really difficult to think through each thing and to really make sure that it was relevant and that it wasn't taking away from your message. Because I know you say that you struggle with language sometimes, but I think, especially in conversation, people listening to this now will notice when you're excited about something, it comes across really well and you're really eloquent and there's so much energy there. And I didn't want to get in the way of that. I didn't want to stop that from coming through in the book.
Well, you didn't. You enhanced it, so you really helped me. And as I said to you, I'll be forever grateful and buying you dinners and drinks for the rest of your life. So, but yeah, it is intimate also with yourself. So you have you're having these intimate conversations with yourself. Like every day you're writing, you're trying to get a page or 2 pages of writing done, and sometimes you do get into states of flow and you find something and you're really happy with it. And then other times you're like, oh, I just can't get this paragraph done. Like, even if you take breaks, you come back to it, you just can't get it done. So it's really interesting because you're trying to express yourself truthfully with each sentence. And when you're bullshitting yourself, if you shortcut something, or if you try and I think, oh, maybe I can just take these words from someone else and use them. And you just can't do that when you're writing a book on a subject you care about. So yeah, it takes a lot of effort to write a book. But I guess the first one's the hardest.
Well, so that sounds promising. It sounds like maybe there's a sequel in the works.
Maybe. We'll
maybe
have to have a
yet.
chat. Not anytime soon.
Yeah, you deserve a break.
I've got to sell this book first, don't I?
So you just mentioned, you referred to quoting others. And earlier on, you were talking about all the different people that you've interviewed here, whose ideas you wanted to pull through into the book. And it is amazing. There's such a diverse group of people that you've spoken to and whose ideas you have incorporated here, people from different countries with different types of expertise. And I just find it amazing that you were able to track down all of these people all over the place. So I'd really be interested to hear in that process. How did you come across these people? And what have you learned in comparing and contrasting all the different views that they've shared with you?
Yeah, I've just realized perhaps all my experience with marketing and online marketing and SEO really helped me Google. And I was Googling all these different keywords, and that really helped me find researchers. Then I stumbled upon websites like ResearchGate, where I could download and read research papers. So once I knew about, there are all these research websites, and you can, for the most part, freely download all these professors or researchers' work, I thought, wow. And then I would just go onto their search engines and just type in all these words related to Ikigai, or the word Ikigai itself. Then I reached out to authors who had written on Ikigai or related concepts, both Japanese and non-Japanese. And then I thought, Japanese culture includes all these fine arts or crafts. So it'd be worthwhile trying to interview people who practice the way of tea or martial arts or Japanese calligraphy. And so it just all started by doing lots of thinking on who to interview. And at times it was hard because sometimes I couldn't find a guest for my podcast, or a lot of people would just say, no, I'm busy, I'm not interested. So sometimes it was hard, but now I've really found a way to find guests, and not a lot of people, but some people approach me as well. And I think living in Japan and having a connection to Japanese people and having friends I can chat to every now and then, that sort of just helped overall. If I had any ideas or wanted some perspective, I could just Zoom or Skype one of my friends. And you actually, you are kind of responsible for all this, because you kept on telling me all the work I'd done for the actual coaching program. was pretty much a dissertation. And, and I was going, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a program. So that was always in the back of my head. And I think that kind of fueled me to keep looking for research, just keep looking for evidence-based content. And yeah, it opened up this world where I was interviewing all these amazing people, one of Japan's coolest neuroscientists to this amazing author, Gordon Matthews, who wrote an incredible book back in the 1990s. Just so many people. And yeah, as for comparing and contrasting their views on the subject of Ikigai, it showed me what a subjective and personal concept it can be. And so going back to Ken Mogi, this amazing neuroscientist, he talks about Ikigai as a spectrum of everything, just all the things in life that make you feel it's worth living. And it can be your morning cup of coffee, going for a run, or pursuing a life-defining goal. And then Professor Gordon Matthews, who's an anthropologist, he believes our Ikigai can really be only one thing, our most important relationship, or, the work we're focused on, maybe a dream we're pursuing, perhaps our belief in religion. And, they're both professors. They have incredible lived experience. And I think both their opinions are valid and we can appreciate both. So for me, it was just a joy, and it was never, one's better than the other, or he's wrong and she's right, or she's wrong or he's right. It was just, wow, this keeps getting more interesting and kind of more complex as I keep diving through all this work. So yeah, it's fascinating how there are all these different opinions from all these educated but really down to earth, kind and thoughtful people.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I enjoyed about reading it as well, just seeing the breadth of ideas. And one of the reasons that I kept saying, oh yeah, all this research you've done is like a dissertation, is that you were finding all of these things that were so disparate from seemingly random corners of Japanese culture, and showing how all of those things were linked to Ikigai in some fashion. You could speak with someone who's doing calligraphy, and they would be just kind of spontaneously talking about, Ikigai is a part of this process. And it really did make me think, is there something from my own cultural context where I can see this theme in everything we do? And I couldn't really, and that was just fascinating to me, how this is something that's so pervasive, and how you can pick any little bit of Japanese culture or history, whatever, and you can trace it back to Ikigai, and you can see where that connection is made. And I loved how you did that, and how you pulled all of these things together and showed, that pattern that you could find everywhere.
Well, thank you. I think you helped me articulate that. But yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? Just one little word, but it has these connections to all aspects of our life, especially the meaningful aspects of our life, life satisfaction, our relationships, our sense of purpose, flow, self-actualization. And I feel I've only scratched the surface. Like, I haven't gone to Japan and interviewed hundreds of people, which is something I hope to do. So I really feel I'm just getting started. So maybe there's a few more books to come.
Yeah, good. A moment ago, you mentioned how everyone has their own experience. So you were talking about Ken Mogi and Gordon Matthews. They have their own experience, and that has influenced how they perceive Ikigai. In the book, you write about a lot of your own personal experiences as well. And I think that's one of the really nice kind of humanizing aspects of the book, actually, is really getting that sense of what does this look like in real life, and then hearing that through your stories. I was hoping that you might be willing to share one of those stories with us now, so the audience could have a taste of what's to come in the book.
Yeah, you encouraged me to do this more in the book. And I remember thinking, There just too many that I can't think of any at the moment. And I really struggled to find one when I was writing one day. And then I remembered this evening or this afternoon when my manager at my English school, so I used to teach Eikaiwa, which is English conversation, asked me if I wanted to go and have drinks after work. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm always up for a drink. So, yeah, he took me to this very upmarket bar, and it was clear he was a regular there. And I think it was pretty much a whiskey bar. And he had a reserve bottle with his name tag on it. That's something they do in Japan. So you essentially buy a bottle, they keep it for you, and then I guess they charge you a service fee every time you come in and drink. And yeah, this was a really interesting experience. My younger self kind of chuckle when I look back on this, but I was pretty desperate for a beer. So when my manager said, what do you want to drink? I asked for a beer. And so he ordered, and thinking, I'm the guest, I was a bit surprised when the barman pulled this massive chunk of ice out of the bar well, and he just starts chipping at it. I'm thinking, what's he doing? Like, we've ordered 2 drinks and he's chipping a block of ice. And I got pretty impatient. I think it was summer, and I just wanted to have that beer. So after a minute, I just directly asked the barman to pour me my beer. Oh, it's such an epic fail now when I think back. So he looked at my manager. My manager kind of just nodded, and then he poured me the beer. And then once I had a few sips and I was kind of relaxed, I started to see what was going on. And this barman was chipping this chunk or this block of ice into a sphere. And it was amazing. He could sort of chip away, and he almost had a perfect sphere formed. And then he poured out a knife, and then he smoothed out the surface. And then he put this near perfect sphere in a short glass, and then poured whiskey over it. And it looked so delicious that I thought, oh man, I wish I could drink whiskey. And yeah, later in the evening, my manager kind of said, you were a bit offhand and rude to order the beer. And I'm going, what are you talking about? We're friends. Like, he's going, no, Nick, you need to sort of understand the context here. And so he sort of explained it's still a work relationship, and he was taking me out for drinks. So I should have been aware that this was, something rare that probably didn't happen to all staff members. And he was probably also wanting to mentor me in a way, show me how to do things. And I was too focused on getting my beer to worry about that. But I also miss this Japanese cultural practice of kodowari, which means paying attention to the fine details of your work. Now, I think the idea of these ice balls has become quite popular now, and you can buy them, and if you go on YouTube, you'll see quite a few videos. But back 20 years ago, it's 20 years ago. It's almost 20 years ago. No, it's almost 20 years ago. Yeah. I had no idea they existed. And to see someone spend about 3 minutes chipping away at a block of ice just to provide the best possible drinking experience for someone. Now when I look back, it sort of blows my mind. And I think this is something that was created in Japan. The Japanese have this way to think about how can I best possibly serve the customer, but also show them that I'm doing that. But also they're doing it for themselves. They want to create that experience. And I was just so focused on my beer that I totally missed that. And yeah, when I look back, I've actually tried to find the manager. I've Googled his name. I've gone on Facebook and I can't find him. So I wanted to say, hey, remember that night you took me drinking? I didn't really thank you enough. And yeah, I wish we could do that again. So that was a really interesting experience. I have many more that are actually far more personal. So if people are interested, they'll have to read the book.
But I think even that one, that gives you a real taste, gives listeners a real taste of what you were talking about earlier when you said, it can make you feel very vulnerable and it's quite intimate to tell these
Mm.
sorts of stories because you are sort of humbling yourself in front of the audience there when you're saying, look, I made this massive faux pas. But I love how you are able to look back and take something out of that. And I'm
Mm.
curious to hear, what do you want readers to take out of that now that you've related that story, or listeners in this case, now that you've related that story, what do you hope that people are going to learn from it?
That's a good question. I just hope that after reading these stories and the book, that hopefully occasionally people will remind themselves just to be more present, more patient, value the kindness or the service of others. And yeah, to think back, I was so focused on my beer, I missed something quite amazing. And I was lucky to capture half of that. So I think if we're patient and we're present, even in settings we're familiar with, at a bar, at a restaurant, at a park, we get to glimpse these. It might be, if it's at a park, we get to glimpse beautiful aspects of nature, birds flying or flowers that we might not see that are flourishing because they're hidden behind a fence or they're obscured in some way. So I think if we can remind ourselves to be present, patient, and to value the kindness of others or the beauty of nature, then you feel that life is worth living. Like, it's good to be alive. Yeah. So nothing overly dramatic.
Well, I think that these are things that we often feel. We often kind of feel them personally, but we don't always feel comfortable articulating those sorts of things because of the vulnerability, because you think, oh, I might sound kind of silly, whatever it is. We often hesitate to just open up our mouths and say that kind of thing in the moment. And I'm curious, what is it like to share that sort of thing with the whole world now, listening and reading? When you are being very honest about your deepest feelings.
Yeah, it gets me quite emotional. Actually, when I decided to write the book, I thought, right, if I'm doing this, I've got to let it all, all show, just show it all. And whatever happens, happens. So I kind of thought, I've got to do this in order to write the book. But I do get emotional thinking about these things and thinking about the idea of sharing them. But I also feel very privileged and grateful for all the people and all the experience I've encountered in my life in Japan. So I have so many things in writing this book that I remember. Like, I've been reminded of all these amazing experiences. And yeah, Japan has given so much to me. So to share it with other people is it's like a source of ikigai for me.
Mm.
And yeah, I've really built intimate relationships and made new friends by sharing this knowledge. So it's really special.
I think that honesty and realness, those are things that absolutely come through in conversations with you, like right now, and in your workshops that you deliver, certainly in the book. And I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of this material resonates. It's one of the things I did like about the book, which is why I suggested, include more stories if you can. Another thing I really liked as well was the etymological information. And I know that you really thought long and hard about the things that you included and how much information to include, because you didn't want to overwhelm people that didn't necessarily need that. But I love it, and I love how you can look into the kanji, the different terms, the different words, to then kind of, deconstruct and reveal what's the deeper meaning, where does this come from, what can we get out of this now. And I'm hoping that you'd be willing to share one or two of your favorites. And you mentioned throughout, like, this is one of my favorites, and this is also one of my favorites. I know you have many favorites. So are there any particular words or phrases that you would like to teach us now here on the podcast?
Absolutely. There could be quite a long list, but I'll start with two. And you're right. When you look at the kanji and you break down the kanji of a word, it can open, it's almost like an epiphany when you understand what's being expressed through the kanji. And when I looked at the word IKIGAI-KAN, it blew my mind. So shimei means purpose, and we know kan means feeling or awareness or perception. And so it's probably a little bit hard to explain on the podcast, but we'll have a try. So shimei is constructed of two kanji. And so the shi is used for the verb to use. So it's called scowl in Japanese, but it means to use. So you have this one kanji character meaning essentially use. And then the second is also read as, so it's shimei, so it's read as may, but it's also read as inochi, meaning life. So you have essentially use life, and then you add kan to that. It's could be understood, and this is how I understood it. Once I got this, I was like, oh, that's what purpose is. So it's the feeling or sense of how you use or wish to use the life that has been given to you. So that's what I drew from the kanji. It's how the feeling of how you use your life is a sense of purpose. And it kind of blew me away. 3 characters means all this, and it defines purpose from a perspective I never really thought about. So that kind of blew my mind. Our purpose is the way we use our life, and a sense of purpose is, yeah, this feeling of how we use or how we want to use the life that's been given to us. So that's pretty mind-blowing. And then another one that became really special because it actually represents Ikigai tribe and the community that I've built. And we built this really quickly in the first cohort with you and these other members, really special people, is this word ibasho. And it's made up of the verb iru, which means to exist, and basho, place. And this is really interesting because originally the word just meant whereabouts. So if you said, where's the whereabouts of someone, you'd use ibasho. But because of Japan's recent challenges, we won't get into them in too much detail, but with truancy, with people withdrawing themselves, hikikomori, social withdrawal, there's this understanding that there's actually a lack of ibasho in Japan, and that translates to there's this lack of place to be for many people in Japan. So ibasho means your place to be, where you can be your authentic self, your true self, where you feel comfortable and accepted by other people. And yeah, I think on our first cohort, you would remember Julie, who one day just said, oh, Ikigai tribe's my ibasho, and I can say things I can't even say to friends and family. It's sort of strung at my emotions. I end up sort of shedding a few tears. So these words have so much meaning, and they meant so much, I think, for our group. Yeah, so they're 2 words, shimei-kan, a sense of purpose, and ibasho, your place to be. Yeah.
And there are many more of those in the book for people who found that interesting. You can have more if you pick up Nick's book.
Thank you. Good to plug the book. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting to kind of build on ibasho, actually. So, in our conversations in Ikigai Tribe things in the book, you do talk a lot about the time you spent in Japan, but you also, you're back in Australia now. You're not still in Japan. And I think you're really honest about how, yes, you love elements of Japanese culture, but there are also some things that you actually prefer a bit from the West, and you're very even and what you're looking at in both, and you kind of look at them side by side and say both of them have great things to offer. And I think that's one of the reasons why actually, this concept in your book in particular are accessible to a global audience, is because you're saying you can take these elements from all around and put them together to create your own kind of philosophy. And I'm just interested in thinking about, can you pick a particular Japanese practice that you wish was more widespread elsewhere? And perhaps can you think about something from the West that you wish the Japanese could do a little bit more so that we could have balance across the piece?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I love this question. So I think for the West, something I learned that I'd love to see here in the West that I learned in Japan is to talk things up less. And I think if you go on to any social media, people are talking about this best version of themselves, or striving to be this best version of themselves. Or we hear phrases like zone of genius, or, we're crushing it, or bring it on. And yeah, I mean, I used to love that idea of, oh yeah, be the best version of yourself. But it's just something you never hear in Japan. And Japanese are very humble. They're very focused on what they do. And they just don't talk like this. And it's kind of so refreshing to think about. And for some reason in the West, we've got to sort of thump our chests, or I don't know, show off a little. And it's almost a little bit embarrassing. So yeah, so I hope we can learn from Japanese to talk things up less. And for Japan, I think, and this is probably a bit more serious, but I wish Japanese could ask for help more. They have so many social problems, loneliness, depression, this incredible problem of hikikomori, where they, these young men shut themselves away for years, and youth suicide. And there just aren't enough government support services. And I think Japanese have this shame associated to asking for help. So I wish there were more support services, and I wish Japanese felt more comfortable asking for help, even just from, family and friends.
Yeah, I think those are both really good lessons, no matter what culture you're from. Those are some really good practices to think about. Where does this sit for me, and how can I engage with this?
Thank you. Yeah.
So just thinking about a couple final points here. I'm really curious how you see the book fitting into your wider suite of Ikigai related work. So you've mentioned that you do have a business, you have Ikigai Tribe. So where does this fit into the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, well, I think the book will become a resource and essential reading for my program. And I'll probably be sending each new coach my review copies, because they've got a few typos in them. So that'll be something special to offer. And it'll also give just readers some idea about my certification program. So yeah, I think the book will be essential reading for the program. And I'm also actually working with someone, Motoki Ton, who's a member of our community, and he's been on this podcast. He presented the idea of doing an Ikigai Summit and trying to bring together hopefully most of the people I've interviewed, and yourself included, to present over a 2-day event, all these aspects related to Ikigai. So I guess I'd be presenting the book and sharing insights and I guess the story behind the book. And I guess from a business perspective, I never really wanted the book to be, the ultimate business card or anything like that. But I guess it will serve as a way for me to, generate interest in what I do.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying, from the perspective of someone who has gone through the coaching course and has read the book, that I did learn very different things from each one of those. So I definitely can see, of course there's overlap. They both are about Ikigai, but they are very distinct experiences for people with different sorts of interests. So I definitely do see those as fitting side by side and supporting each other.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Well, just a little plug there. The summit, you mentioned the summit. Can you tell us a little bit more about when that's likely to take place?
Yes. So October got a lot of interest. Almost everyone I've asked has said yes. The only concern is timing and dates.
Yeah.
So I've just sent out an email to everyone who's interested. So we should, by the time of this podcast, that when it's published, we should have some dates. So people will be able to, know.
And folks can stay tuned by visiting the website, following you on LinkedIn. What would you suggest for getting info?
Yeah, if you're not a subscriber, go to Ikigai Tribe and subscribe to my list, or follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most proactive with my, I guess, marketing or social media. I'll be announcing that a lot. I'll probably also mention it on the podcast as we decide on dates and what we're going to do. Yeah.
Exciting. Now, I don't want to push you, because you did say that you do need to, market the book a little bit, but now you've finished writing it. Have you turned your eyes to any future projects already, or are you just kind of in sales mode?
Well, remember how I told you so many times, that's it, man. Once this book's done, I'm never writing another book again.
Chiseled that in stone.
Well, guess what? I've actually already written the chapter outline of the new book. So if you're up for it, we can work together on a new book maybe next year.
Ambitious.
Well, I've got the book writing bug, I guess. So, but yeah, no, I mean, it's in all seriousness, it's obviously to get this book out there, market it, and see where it goes. But I am inspired and think, wow, you don't have to be an academic to write a book. And if you stuffed up at school and really struggled with writing, that doesn't equate to who you are now. And I think if you know your limitations, but you're true to yourself and you get help, you can write something that's worth reading. So yeah, I think I'll be writing another book at some stage.
Good. I'm genuinely glad to hear that, because I do think that this one is full of lovely things, and people will get a lot out of it. And as a teacher, which I am, that I didn't exactly mention that earlier in my introduction, but as a teacher, that's exactly the sort of thing we want. I want my students to walk out of class with, is that understanding that it doesn't matter exactly what your skill set is. Everyone has something valuable to share with the world, and everyone can do that. And I do think that, this book is a great example of that. And I'm really pleased that you did cross the finish line, because I do think it's great.
Well, thank you. I have so many people to thank. And there's actually, if you go to IKIGAI-KAN.com, there's a video where I go through all the people who helped me write this book. So there are so many people to thank, and I think we're pressed for time, but I do want to say thank you to all the members of Ikigai Tribe who took an interest in this and were very, very supportive and are now helping me promote the book. So yeah, that's a really life-affirming experience to have all these people support me. And of course, I couldn't have written the book without you. So I feel this really special connection and bond between us. I feel like we're, Ikigai siblings. So thank you so much for all the hard work and effort and the many hours. I still think it's many hours you put into editing my book, and all the love and care you put into your suggestions and feedback and support.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure. I'm very excited to see where this goes. And just to give it a final plug, so your new book is called IKIGAI-KAN, Feel a Life Worth Living. And can you just remind the audience where they can get their hands on a copy of this?
So they can get it on Amazon. So it's live. So if you do a search for Ikigai-KAN on Amazon, you'll find the book. And if you want to learn more about the book, one thing I can say is if you buy a paperback version of the book, send proof of purchase to support@ikigaitribe.com, and then you will be part of a book club I'm forming. And the idea behind the book club is to have a monthly Q&A where you can ask questions about the book, or hopefully I'll get a guest speaker, someone who's contributed to the book, or maybe another author who's written on something related to Ikigai. So yeah, become a member of the Ikigai-KAN book club at IKIGAI-KAN.com. And here's the
Excellent.
book. Should mention the other tagline, Japanese wisdom for a fulfilling and meaningful life. So there it is.
So that awaits all buyers of your new book.
Yes, hopefully.
Well, thanks very much, Nick, for allowing me to interview you on your own podcast. It has been a pleasure to chat with you, as it was a pleasure to read the book. And I wish you all the best of luck with upcoming book sales and growing the Ikigai Tribe community.
Well, thank you for hosting. I think you could become a regular co-host or a host. So maybe we'll do this again. And I'd love to have you back on also as a guest. So thank you for everything you've done for me and keep doing for me. Bye.
Bye.